Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. Jerald Tanner was the first person to publicly identify a Salamander letter as a fake. This despite so many people who had declared it as genuine. His wife, Sandra Tanner, describes how Jerald came to this conclusion. Check out our conversation. Before you do that, I just want to mention a couple of things. First of all, we've got our George Throckmorton transcript out, so if you're a monthly subscriber, I'll be having that to you in the next few days. Also, I'd just like to announce that I will be moderating a couple of panels at Sunstone. So if you're going to Sunstone, it's next week, July 26th through the 28th, I believe, at the Mountain America Center. It used to be called the Southtown Expo Center, about 106 South or so in Sandy. So if you're there, please stop by, say hi. I'd love to meet you. And it'll be a lot of fun to meet with a lot of people. I think Newell Bringhurst and Matt Harris will be there, as well as a lot of other fun authors. So anyway, back to our conversation.
When the Salamander letter got rumored, and Mark's the one given the rumors, he would start these rumors around to increase the value of his documents. And so he starts a rumor around that there's this Martin Harris letter that has a screwy take on Joseph's involvement in magic and the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, done by Martin Harris. And so we started hearing through the grapevine some of this. And Jerald, different ones, people that he knew that were in the Mormon circle, one of them being Mike Marquardt. I don't know if you've had any place to talk to Mike, but you might.
I know Mike a little bit.
Yeah, you might want to talk to him. But Jerald would say, I've got to see the whole text of this letter, because we'd get snippets of, it says this, or, you know. Jerald says, no, I got to see the whole letter. To really see, to understand what we're dealing with here, I've got to see the whole letter. Well, we finally got a typescript of the letter. We haven't seen the document, but Jerald finally got a typescript of it. And in preparing for doing a study on this, when he first started getting the rumors of this letter, he went back and reread E.D. Howe's Mormonism Unveiled, the different statements by the Smith neighbors.
You say he, is that
Jerald.
Jerald, okay.
Jerald realizes there's a story of a document out there that claims to be by Martin Harris about the magic involvement of Joseph in the coming forth of the Book of Mormon in a magic setting. So he went back to E.D. Howe's Mormonism Unveiled that has statements by the neighbors that all talk about the Smiths' involvement in magic. And so he's becoming more familiar with getting that fresh in his mind what these affidavits all said. And there had been a BYU Studies article a year or two before that had talked about Joseph Knight, who was an early Mormon at the Smith home at the time of the coming out of the Book of Mormon. And he had read that article. So he was kind of getting prepped up so that on his research ahead of time, so when he gets that copy of the letter, he'd be able to jump right into an evaluation of it. So he gets the letter, the type copy, not the original. And he's reading through this, and the more he looks at it, he says to me, there's something wrong. He said, this has got phrases in it that have to come from E.D. Howe and from the Joseph Knight letters. And so someone's making this up. Now, I don't think he was sure that it was Mark, but someone was making up documents. This is a forgery. And I'm like, Jerald, everyone accepts Mark's documents. I mean, Dean Jesse at the Church Historian's Office is not going to want to accept Mark's documents that are critical of Joseph Smith, that tie him to magic, unless they feel they have to. I mean, why wouldn't they be asking these questions? Jerald says, I don't care, I'm telling you. There's something wrong. The similarities of wording is too much there. So I'm playing devil's advocate, and I said, well, okay, if these all are, the E.D. Howe guys are talking about, Martin Harris told me XYZ. and you got Joseph Knight, when I was there, XYZ happened, Martin Harris said thus and so kind of stuff, Okay, well, why couldn't it be that Martin Harris had a set way of telling his story and used the same phrasing all the time to people when he told the story? And so these all reflect how Martin had formulated a pretty standard way of telling his story. And that's why you get this echo of the same phrases through it. But I know myself, when I retell old events, I tend to fall into certain phrases that I'm used to describe the event to a lot of different people. I've done enough interviews that I know this, that I go back and think, oh, okay, that's the same way I said it in the other one, So I thought, well, this could just be a pattern of he's formulated a way to tell the story. And Jerald says, no, I'm telling you, E.D. Howe statements and Joseph Knight come first. Then you get the Salamander letter. And I said, why can't it be the other way around? This is just the way Martin always told it, so you see this echo in these documents. Nope. He says, I'm absolutely convinced this Salamander letter is a product of someone studying Martin Harris. I said, well, the whole world's on the other side. I don't care. Oh, wow. So Jerald gets this preliminary study done up, does a little $1 pamphlet challenging this wording that it looks like it's a lift from these other documents, and sends me up to Sunstone Symposium that they had once a year. Well, they still have them, but at that time they were, I think it was at the Hotel Utah, if I remember right. Anyways, so I go up there and handed this out to different people, critical of, well, not saying that Mark's a fraud, but that the documents got a problem. Well, I have to say, before I went up there with this, I'm telling Jerald, we could get sued. You can't just run around saying something's forgery. Someone's going to sue us. Mark will sue us for defamation or something. And Jerald says, he's not going to sue us. I said, well, how can you be sure? He says, because it's a forgery. He has no background to prove this document. And I, well, please don't lose my house. Okay, so here I'm up passing this little...
So let me just pause for a second there. So the Martin Harris letter had a lot of, as you said, magic in it. And so some might consider that at least critical of the Joseph Smith story. And then you have a reputation of being critical of Mormonism. So you've got the Mormon church who believes this anti-Mormon document is legit, and then you've got and I know some people refer to you as an anti-Mormon, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, but you've got an anti-Mormon who's questioning the legitimacy of an anti-Mormon document. I mean, does that seem a little odd?
Oh yeah, it's a man bite dog story, which is why we got written up in a lot of newspapers and books later, because Jerald was the first one to be critical. And Jerald said at the time, he says, sure, that'd be great if it was authentic, but I don't want to build my case on anything that's not really historical. That we were already convinced of Joseph Smith's involvement of magic. Well, and all the historians are today. You read any book today. I mean, Bushman's, Joseph Smith Rushstone Rolling, he admits all the magic involvement stuff. But at that time, there weren't as many on board with the magic beginnings of Mormonism. And so it was a much more of a shock value for most people to hear about that sort of thing. But Jerald says, it would be easy to build my case on all kind of sensational literature, but I want what I say to be verifiable, that whoever looks at it can say, well, that's the document. Regardless of my feelings, that's what really is the paper trail. And but everybody says it's authentic. Dean Jesse has verified the handwriting. Well, of course, now we know Mark Hofmann had set up the scenario of how they documented the handwriting for Martin Harris, because evidently the church didn't have Martin Harris handwriting. So Mark had made up several different innocuous Martin Harris things to establish Martin's handwriting. So when they are looking at the Salamander letter, they're looking at Mark's other Martin Harris documents to verify the handwriting. So it's really crazy.
It's pretty amazing how elaborate some of these scenarios were that Mark did. I mean, he just really did a lot of homework.
Well, I'm not sure how much homework it would take, because there was enough critical material out there that I'm assuming he had his own crisis of faith, did his own research, come to his own conclusions, but I don't know that it was that hard of a research job. I think there were, you had Von Brody at the time, you had Our Mormonism, Shadow Reality. There were other critical texts out there that gave you this magic forerunning story to Mormonism.
Well, what I'm saying though, in my Kurt Bench interview, one of the things that Mark did was he bought a prayer book, as I recall, from Nathan Harris, who was Martin's brother.
Yeah.
And then Mark added something from Martin to, which was used to authenticate the Salamander document later.
Right.
That seems like just kind of multi-dimensional chess almost.
Right. Well, so then the question was, how early did he decide to make up the Salamander letter? Had he already envisioned this when he bought the Nathan Harris book? I don't know that he had. He may have just saw the opportunity to buy that with an idea of someday this could be useful for something, and then come up with an idea of how to use it. So who knows how early this all came about, or was it one thing led to another and it just evolved? I don't know. I suppose we'll never know, because you can't trust what Mark says. You have to go on the documents and that to follow the trail, because I'm not sure how far I could trust Mark's reminiscences of his life story. I think he wants to build his reputation of being the world's greatest forger, so he has a vested interest in trying to make it look more grandiose, maybe.
So you think that this was a fairly easy thing to do then? To
well, not easy, but I don't know that he had to. I think, well, let me see. I think Mark had an extremely good memory. I don't know if it was photographic, but, well, like Jerald. My husband had a very advanced memory, not photographic, but he held stuff in his mind. And I think that Mark must have been like that as well, so that when he read stuff, it just sort of stuck. And so I might have to go back and do a lot of research. I'm not sure how much Mark had to do. I don't know how much he just retained the things he read. Mm-hmm. But there was material out there. If you read E.D. Howe and Brody, and then moved up to Shadow or Reality, you got a lot of information just in those 3 books to give you this background of what you wanted to make up to embarrass the church along the way. The reason, I believe, that the church bought into the Salamander letter, well, one of the things, I believe it fit the scenario that the historians knew was the way the thing happened. They already knew how much the Smiths were involved in magic. And that if you found something by Martin Harris at that early time period, it very well could reflect the magic surroundings of the community and Joseph's involvement in money digging and all. So some of the people writing later about the Hofmann case have implied that Mark was trying to change early church history. No, he was trying to force the church to admit early church history. Because in Mark's mind, he knew Joseph was involved in magic and money digging before he came up with the idea of the gold plates. And so he's trying to force the church to admit this shady beginning of the system. Not to make up a story, but to force the church to admit that is the story.
But by doing so, he made up a story.
But he made up a story to do it, yes. But the church already knew about the magic material. I mean, not what Mark was claiming to find, but they knew this was the early story of Joseph's life, was this involvement with the money diggers and the magic, going out at midnight making magic circles and incantations to bind the spirits that were keeping you from getting the treasure. The church knew that this was the Smith background. So they already were predisposed to believe such a document would be authentic. And then given that Mark had supplied the Martin Harris signature samples to be able to test his document, you can see how easily they were led down the path to accept it as an authentic document. But Jerald, he just had a sixth sense for that type of thing.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Sandra Tanner. In our next conversation, we'll talk an early 20th century forgery. I wasn't familiar with it at all, but it involves Oliver Cowdery, and Sandra describes how they discovered it was not authentic.
They've tried to imitate Cowdery's writing style by taking phrases from these letters, although they were in a different context, but the phrasing of Cowdery from these letters to make this document. So he'd already been down this trail before on trying to figure out through analysis of the content of whether it could really be a forgery or something the author would have really written. And so when he looks at the Salamander letter, he says, these are phrases, it's too pat. There are phrases here that are lifted from E.D. Howe, from this other early book, to make something sound like it's Martin Harris, but it's too pat in the picking up of phrases. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we're going to get sued and I'm going to lose everything.
I hope you enjoyed that short clip from our next interview. If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please go to our patreon.com/gospeltangents and subscribe for just $5 a month. If you'd like a transcript of this, please click the yellow subscribe button at gospeltangents.com, and I'll send you this and all future transcripts. Also, if you'd like a paperback like we've got here, those are available at our website at amazon.com. Just do a search for Gospel Tangents. Please get all updates at our Facebook page at facebook.com/gospeltangents. We're also on Twitter at Gospel Tangents. You can also get transcripts individually at our website, gospeltangents.com/shop. Finally, make sure that you subscribe on our Apple Podcast page. Just do a quick search for Gospel Tangents there and give us a 5-star review while you're at it. Thanks again for listening. Your support helps create more Mormon history classes and podcasts such as this, and so I really appreciate you listening. Please share with your friends. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here you'll see some more of our great videos. Thanks again.